item on the agenda is an update from the supervisor. You go over it after the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any list in particular?
Up front, if you could, please.
Up front.
So that Mark
I can get you. Yep.
get everything.
Right here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, thank you. And Tim asked if I could stop by and give some updates on some happenings. Most of the recent, some are old, but I'll just kind of give you a quick overview of some things. First, I think, Tim, I think this distributed this cyber event. I apologize, I didn't realize, I don't know if you had this available. Okay, all right, well,
I can run and make copies for the people.
if you'd like to, but I think in the end, it's pretty self-explanatory. Basically, the access to the library is over Mercy Fair Lane. Mercy Fair Lane is a private road, it's not a town road. Private road means that the town has no role whatsoever maintaining it. It's not been dedicated to the town, it's not been assumed by the highway department, it's completely a private road. Now, Mercy Fair Lane goes from Route 20, past your entrance, and then takes a left, take it over to Wymington. So it's owned by two private entities. I think it was St. Peter's Healthcare Partners, something along that line, and then Columbia Development owns the balance. About 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks ago, I was approached by the engineer for St. Peter's Health, who wants to modify the parking lot for this building further down on the right-hand side. And as part of that, they would like to dedicate to the town Mercy Fair Lane up to the point that they own, which is only about 500 some odd feet from Route 20, basically to their entrance. What that would mean is they would have to upgrade it to town standards in terms of the quality of the pavement, the depth of the pavement, the width of the road to be 30 feet. So it would be a substantial improvement over what is there. Now, a couple of things come up immediately is the town doesn't take dead-end roads. So there always has to be an area at the end where our snowplows can turn around and hopefully keep the road in good shape and clear and whatnot. Now, there was some discussion, and Kim was apprised of this. We would like to have the entirety of Mercy Fair Lane dedicated to the town. That would require the cooperation of the next owner over, which is Columbia Development. There is a relationship between that owner and St. Peter's with the facilities. One entity owns the first 500 feet, and then it's the tenant for another building towards the back. So there's a lease of relationship that we're hoping that they will recognize, and they'll see the benefit, not only to themselves in terms of gaining access over a quality road, and also having the town take over and maintenance going forward. So we're hopeful, that that's going to take place, but until it actually happens, we really don't know. I'm going to be meeting with the engineer today tomorrow on another project, and I'll certainly raise and see where he's at on this. Now, there's another thing I want you to be aware of. Probably 6 months or so ago, strip of land behind the library, which in the past have been envisioned as a access point for what was then Glassworks Village, that land was taken in foreclosure by the county for back taxes, and then I contacted the county and rather have it been sold potentially to a person who might want to take it and hold it hostage for whatever. The town took title to that strip, so that strip basically is now being preserved.
The town took title or
The town. I contacted the county. The
Town
county.
took title, okay.
Yes, I gave a deed, another copy here. Here, we don't have it already, which shows the dedication of the town. So what that means is it's historically been a paper street on subdivision maps going back 30 years, and again, That was, the bottom line on that. So, and again, we're hopeful, that's always a backup. Backup meaning that if there truly is a need and this other opportunity to gain access to Whiting Road and ultimately their light doesn't come through, whether or not there might be an appropriate one-way getting to the light, something to talk about, down the road. Any questions about that routing at this point?
The only question I had, Peter, was whether the town would consider making a turning lane.
Yes. It really didn't be up to DOT because it's intersection. It's a good question about whether that answer that. Yes, there could be a right-hand turn lane when you get to Route 20, so you won't be staying behind cars when you take a left.
Right.
That requires DOT approval, but it's something the town would recommend. You should also add, anytime we have a road put in, particularly a road that passes a library and not to preliminaries, we're going to ask for a sidewalk installed the entire length of the road, at least the road meaning the pipe is personnel. If we get the rest of Whiting Brook, sidewalk down to the other business down there. The question is on both sides of it, east or west, that's something that an engineer take a look at. If it's on the library side, that may or may not cause problems for your sign. They may have to move back. That's a whole other, down the road, a little bit.
I would add it also, besides making it less of a line, also, I think people that are in that left turn lane are feel pressured to go quicker.
Right. And I know, look, I understand there's been a study and a report back, and people are very concerned, we're very concerned, the town's very concerned, but I've checked with DOT a number of times, there isn't any measurable reason for a traffic light. There are no what's called warrants. There are no warrants that would justify a traffic light there. There isn't any accident history at that intersection. I've taken that turn a lot of times. I'm shocked. But I think a lot of people are careful, cautious. I repeat, for the most part, they're smart people. They're careful.
What helps is like a turning lane to the western that allowed you to pull onto that until traffic moved.
Yeah, and there already is to a certain extent. I mean, that's what I do. I pull into that curve before. But that's something that DOT will have to look at when they decide to rewire or restrict.
Right, that's right.
So, Peter, the area that would become the dedicated area would be on this side of this red line here?
Well, actually, it's best to look at this map. This shows it better. On your map there.
Okay, go up a few better.
Yeah. About 500 and so.
Does that take it to Spark Center or not quite?
I don't think it does. It takes it to the building on the right-hand side.
Okay.
For security.
Just not her secret.
Again, the next one over, this Spark now is a tenant to the owner, so there is potentially a business incentive to complete the road. The road should have been completed 30 years ago as part of additional buildings that were never built. It was until those buildings were built, that's when the road would have been dedicated to the town. Still waiting.
So I would imagine during the construction of the road that's going to be dedicated, I mean, there still has to be access because of the nursing home, as far as the library. So nothing will change. We still have access to the building, they still have access to the
During
building.
construction?
During the construction.
Oh, yeah, I think typically what they do is off hours, they try to
Okay.
overnight and whatnot. They always, they do construction on schools, so they don't close the schools. Okay. A couple of the real quick ones, as you know, the town did receive a grant for the sidewalk in from Regency Park, Apartments, Devonshire Drive, up to the library. That, we just sent out our RFPs, we received 3 engineers' recommendations or responses. I expect that the first meeting in October, the town board will designate or select one of those engineers. Ultimately, the construction will probably take place in the spring. It won't take very long. It's a fairly straight stretch or on the real topographical problem until you get to the ravine closer to Regency Park. So, it's an 80-20 match, so it's 1,000%.
said this and I probably missed it, but, so the sidewalk construction will take place in the spring. Do you have a, kind of a ballpark of when the Mercy Care Lane improvement will take place?
I don't think it's gonna take place, well, I do know more tomorrow, but at this point, there's no timeline. As I mentioned, the engineer is looking to see whether or not they can get the entire Mercy Care Lane.
Right.
That might take a little bit more time. We'll have to wait on that.
Sure.
So, but my guess would be you would see it constructed sometime next year. Okay. Let's see, a couple of things that just came up today. You're approaching at some point in the not too distant future to see if you're interested in a charging station. And it's an odd request. Don't ask me why, but the state has a number of programs and grant applications that certain times the town is qualified for, sometimes the library, sometimes the school. This one is only for towns. Basically what it does is allows towns to get funding, and again, it's one of the 80-20 matches, to put a charging station, but it has to be on town property. Well, then I make a couple of phone calls around, I actually, that's what most people do, but there are also the thing called a climate change mitigation easement, which basically allows schools, this department is owned by schools, and libraries to grant an easement to the town, so the town can then come in, qualify this charging station under the town's grant process, and then put a charging station. Now, right up front, we're first going to do it with Altamont Library, because Altamont has no charging station, and Altamont doesn't have to deal with the schools. So we don't have to worry about that. We can just do it for it. It's very easy. They're already in the process of working on their easement. And there's a lot more to that. Who has responsibility for the electricity, or you get to charge for it, well, that's something that you have to decide down to the road. Final thing, relatively minor things. CDTA is promising, I haven't seen it yet, a covered bus stop at the entrance. Not sure, it's probably going to be on to the west of your entrance, on the side opposite your sign.
Yeah.
You want to move the sign to that one. The complicating factor with that is that they like to have sidewalks before they do. Don't want people to simply walk into the driveway. So that may not happen until we get the upgrade to a town road, or in the absence of a town road, somebody decides to put a sidewalk in. But again, we're committed to it. It's going to be the Carpus Hill, who's the executive director of the CDTA, said that their hope is it's going to be one of those smart bus stops that will have time, know when the next bus is coming and do it. So it should be pretty good. So that's my 15-minute update. Anything else? Any questions?
Yeah, crosswalk, probably not.
No. Because they want you to cross the line, which is only,
Oh, it's going to put down at,
I took my bus stop.
yeah.
If the bus stop again would be Route 20 on the west side of Mercy Care Lane, but the access, you have a crosswalk, just across Route 20 or across Mercy Care?
Across Route 20, so they want you to cross up at the fire station.
No,
the
to
one
school.
Cross at the school, at Weinberg.
Oh, at Wayne, okay.
Or, if you're coming the other direction, you have to cross at the Willow Street. Yeah, there's a lot of time, they don't want to do something, they just have to tear something out and make money.
Yeah.
And so, it's gonna happen sometime. But what order, I'm really not sure. Something, an engineer, you can
Rebecca Elder from my office, who's also been working on the project. Rebecca is an architect and an acoustics expert as well, so she's been looking at various aspects of the building in terms of its requirements for acoustic separation and for the resonance and quality of sound as well in areas just like this. So as a quick reintroduction to the process, we've been commissioned to do what is called a master plan for the library. That entails an analysis of the existing conditions of the building, the facility, and the site, so that we can determine the appropriate length of lifespan for each of the various systems and how they might be upgraded and when they should be upgraded, so that we're making sure we're prioritizing things correctly. And in fact, the supervisor's presentation was an excellent segue into some of the priorities we're going to talk about, specifically safety and the charging stations are another issue. Secondly, aside from the physical conditions, which is, if you will, the scaffolding on which we're building the ideas that we're trying to promote for the library, comes the programming. These are the ideas and the spaces and how we use them. And we've been spending quite a bit of time developing the ideas around what we're doing here. So just as an orientation exercise, we probably should have had this up while you were talking.
It would have helped.
I wasn't thinking. But from Western Ave, obviously the main library parking lot, the library with the spine that runs roughly east-west, staff parking, and then the two adjacent properties. And what we talked about earlier was a connection from Mercy Care Lane to Winding Brook. The primary interest, of course, is bringing traffic out at a traffic light. And as we went through the public process of gathering information, one of the very common refrains was the question of safety, both ingress and egress from Mercy Care Lane and Route 20. It's one of the defining factors of the building location and how we're dealing with things. So what we'll do is summarize this evening in a very quick manner both the physical conditions analysis and the programming analysis that we've been doing to date. And the building committee can confirm that, in fact, we've been very busy over this summer dealing with a lot of different things and summarizing that information. So we're going to give you a quick rundown this evening. There are many key issues, and aside from the safety issue at Mercy Care Lane and where it hits Route 20, we know on the site we have another issue related to the speed with which vehicles travel across the face of the entry of the library. I almost got run down once myself. Somebody very anxious to get here and use library services. The queuing and bottleneck that takes place at the book drop area, as well as staff safety getting to and from the book drop to retrieve carts of materials as well. And then even the detail of the fact that in today's world, it was once easy to determine a height, a standard height for the book drop. But today with SUVs and then compact sedans both sharing the same facility, we want to think about how we're actually serving these patrons, and maybe there are better ways. So can we create more safety here and here? Can we perhaps soften the image of the building? One of the questions about the building in terms of its character is how it fits into the context of the community, the history of the community and architecture, as well as the landscape. And right now, we essentially have a large parking lot here. Maybe there are ways to soften that as well, with safer ways to park for people using handicap spots, that has a spine that connects to the main axis of the building, narrows the lane of traffic here, which automatically slows traffic and provides safer crosswalks, and then handicap parking takes place against that and allows them to walk to it. That's one of the things that we're examining as we go. There are a number of things we're looking at with the building, obviously. These are some of the original drawings, but you can see one of the key features in the early design of the library, and the fact that the board should be commended for some of those early decisions. As a library architect, I'm asked very often to speak about the future of libraries and trying to look into that crystal ball or read the tea leaves about where services are going. And the key thing isn't necessarily an exact knowledge of the specific technology that's going to change or program that's going to catch on as the new hot thing next year. We found that we can be confounded by trying to determine that specific thing. But the key is to keep it as flexible as possible. And by having a large open space for collection and even children's program areas, these give us the flexibility to move things around within the library to make more sense in terms of how library services project onto our patrons. So we want to look at the building as a whole, what things are fixed, what things are things that we could potentially upgrade and change. And within that is the structure of the library itself in terms of how it's organized. So between ACS and PPS, the various departments, how they function from, for example, in ACS where we have a tech services here, but a circulation area here, how can we improve that efficiency? If PPS is serving out of offices here, but they're also responsible for the children's area, as well as the help desk and the whole collection, how can we get better proximity to the areas that they serve? These are all things we've been looking at in general. So first, the physical conditions analysis. One of the things we look at is called the building envelope. That is all the things on the building that keep the weather out. And they go from the roof to the walls, doors and windows, and so forth. And as we know, most people think of this as a brand new building. Right? We're considering it, oh, this is the new Gilpin Library. It was just built not that long ago. But 25 years is a quarter century. That slipped by pretty quickly. And as with all buildings, after a quarter century, there are upgrades and things that need to be done. And they're not necessarily a question of maintenance even, but things that just have to be improved as things have changed. One of them, for example, technology, power, and data access. The needs for those have changed dramatically in the last 25 years, even in the last 5 to 10 years. So for example, in many of the libraries with whom we work now, we're not only creating wall outlets that have USB inputs and somebody can recharge a phone and data and so forth throughout, but also little pedestals at seating areas so that we're not stretching cords across and so forth. But going through the list, we know that there are certain areas that are going to require money in order to either upgrade or make a stable situation out of some things that have aged over the last quarter century. We know the retaining wall that separates that first adjacent property has some issues. The grading at the outdoor seating plaza area, there are things that have to be addressed there because they're affecting the quality of the masonry on the exterior of the wall. The weeps at the bottom are now buried by the grading. Throughout, simple things like pruning and roof strainers and the accessories to the roof to extend the life and things like that, to the skylights themselves. The silicone sealants that are used there, that's actually a fairly large job to get around all the sealants to all the windows throughout the building. Around the perimeter of the building, you'll note, in fact, you can see a little bit of it here, but the tongue and groove wood at the transoms and so forth, the weathering of that, they should be repaired or replaced all the way around the building. Again, it's a wood product that's aged over time. There are masonry and window repairs and so forth. There has been talk about the brick entry walk and how accessible it is, or whether it's a trip hazard at the main entry. I received a call at my office, as a matter of fact, about that from somebody who had been at one of the public meetings. Exterior doors around the building, including the delivery door, as well as others that have deteriorated. Improvements to hardware. There's been, just like technology, a lot of changes to how we control access to various parts of the building. And there would be upgrades there that would improve staff safety as well as patron service. The restrooms throughout and finish improvements throughout the building are all things that after all this time are fairly necessary. Walk-off strategies, meaning the walk-off mats. We had this bluestone, which was a nice nod to the idea of bluestone being harvested from the Helderbergs and so forth, and yet we cover it in many cases and have lost the idea of what that is. There may be better ways to address that. And of course, finishes like carpeting throughout the building. These are all things we know we have to deal with. There are lighting issues related to some of the uplights, particularly in the main spine of the building, the monitor that runs the length of the building. It has caused some staining even of the walls, lack of consistency with the lighting itself, and a question of quality of light. So we're lighting up into a space, and we're not really creating an architectural light or one that has, even if it might have the right number of foot candles, the right quality of light for comfort and reading in the spaces themselves. We spent quite a bit of time, as I mentioned, over the summer doing information gathering. This is just a partial list. This does not include, for example, committee meetings or individual site visits, but just to reassure you that what we've had is our ear to the ground with the staff, starting with administrative meetings, staff interviews, follow-up staff interviews, and these are, for the most part, all-day sets of interviews with each department individually, talking with each of the staff members, and then follow-ups with the heads of those departments and so forth. We held what's called a stakeholders day, which is where I met the town supervisor, as a matter of fact, where people from the community were asked to come and answer some questions and give their thoughts regarding library services from the Guilderland Public Library and how the community has certain needs and how we're meeting those. We had 2 different public charrettes, which were the town hall workshops. I believe they were broadcast as well on Facebook, or at least one of them was when we were doing it. And then after all of that, we also did something called a why meeting, or a we heard you meeting. So we summarized a lot of the information that had been given to us and fed it back to the people who attended that public meeting to allow them to give us input on where we stood in terms of what we had heard regarding needs and desires. From that meeting, the why meeting, up until September 1st, we also had public boards at the circulation desk. So every time a transaction was made at the circulation desk, somebody got a vote. You probably saw these boards out there, the dot system, we call them the dot boards, in which they were allowed to prioritize, from their perspective, something they would like to see happen. We also then did a staff dot exercise as well. And you would expect that the staff and the public might have different priorities, but as we'll see here, Becca's going to show us some things where we've combined some of that information and tried to summarize it. And then obviously follow-up meetings with each department, and in fact a survey that was also then passed on to us, which will make up some of the graphics that we'll be talking about tonight. So again, this doesn't include the committee meetings and the various work we've been doing to try and vet all of the concerns from the physical conditions list to the programming and everything. But from the public perspective, the things in green here, there have been over 2,000 public responses, either on the survey or the dot exercise or the public charrette process. So in other words, the effort has been made to try and get as much information as possible. And it won't end there, we have more things to come out. Those of you who were at the Y meeting will remember that you got one last vote in terms of trying to prioritize things. If you answered the question, I love the Guilderland Public Library because, and in fact there were some really interesting responses there. There were some that you would expect to hear about the library. It's a place to grow your mind and expand your horizons. That might be a mission statement for a library. But there were some that were really interesting in terms of making us think about why libraries are important. Access to information and resources that I can't afford. And we think we live in an affluent society where that doesn't happen, but we know that when we think about it, that's not actually true. This was one of my favorites. I love to see people doing different things. Just the idea of, for example, display cases or maker spaces or areas where you see activities and programs that would expose you to something that you might not otherwise have known about. The library is an opportunity for communities to come together and do things like that. So we'll talk about those as priorities. So this was just sort of a section of quotes that came from that. There were many more, of course, but it does end with something that's very true. A library builds a strong community. A good library will continue to develop the idea of what this community is about. That was another quote up here. The people who come here care about Guilderland. And I shouldn't forget the terrific staff consistently came up. People brought up the staff at multiple meetings, the public, unsolicited by the way. Isn't this staff great? It was actually one of the comments people would bring up on their own. So as we started to identify priorities related to the site, for example, we know, and we've just talked about, the access at Mercy Care Lane to Route 20. We know that's an issue, and what we've talked about is trying to improve that via some sort of access to Winding Brook Road, which was just discussed, or a traffic light, which I agree is a very difficult thing to convince DOT to do if they don't have a warrant to do it. We've been through this on other projects as well, and that's probably not a likely avenue, if you'll excuse the expression, to improving the street issue there. But anything we can do to access Winding Brook Road as a potential means of improving that is something that we definitely want to explore and coordinate with the town and what the town is doing. I talked about, this is a very quick sketch that we just discussed with the committee only a couple days ago, but this is that peninsula idea and planting trees and a sidewalk and benches along it, along with low lighting bollards, allows to soften the image of this building. So instead of a sea of asphalt, the parking lot in front of the building, we've softened that, we've made this connection, connected it up to the sidewalk here, extended the island here, and you can see that the book drop now at this position means that somebody pulling up and dropping something off at the book drop is only blocking this one lane and not the main egress from the building. It also puts that spot closer to the access to the building and therefore safer, particularly in inclement weather, for staff to retrieve things from the parking lot. The idea of electric recharge stations. This whole bank could potentially go that route. It's a technology that catches on and continues to develop. But we would also then want to look at not just safety for handicap spots, but quick browse parking or 15-minute parking for people just running in for a minute, or family parking, people who are pulling out strollers and young children and so forth. We're showing an extension of parking up onto this adjacent lot. So the site wall is here separating the two. And it's possible that we might look at additional space for the library that connects to this up on that level. And therefore there will be an entry at that level as well as at this level if we ever expand the building. Right now, what we've been talking about with the committee are improvements within the footprint of the building, but not everything is on the table at the moment. We still want to look at all the best ways to improve all the issues. Site lighting, the greenscape, and softening the library's impact, that has to do with less hardscape and more landscaping, charging stations we just talked about, the book drop location, and coordinating with the sidewalk initiatives and CDTA routing. So you sort of hit each of the buttons along here. And we did talk early on with the town about, so we knew about the sidewalk initiatives and the grant and so forth, and we do want to make sure that we continue to coordinate all those things. The outdoor plaza, which is actually behind the building, is a lovely feature which doesn't get accented enough. It's behind the Mylar curtains, through the windows. Many people actually responded with, I didn't know you could go out there. I wouldn't open the door, I was afraid an alarm would go off. Or we've created an inviting area but not made it apparent how we use it for people. Programmatic general priorities, improving the building access and entry experience. We know that the lobby has some issues related to the length of that, and it's relatively commercial in nature and quality. The programming spaces themselves, one of the great features that you have as a library, of which many would be jealous, is the multiple size meeting rooms. Between Helderberg, Calisenta, Normanskill, there are, and then the small study rooms, there are a whole series of sizes that allow you to reflect different types of reservations. Some libraries are lucky to have one, and they're putting 6 people in a room that seats 100 people, for example. So we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of that and making it as efficient as possible. We want to talk about staff efficiency and workflow, and again, that's part of that conversation, working with each of the individual departments to make sure that we're doing things like providing focus on the services to the patrons and improving sightlines to the building. The intuitive patron usage means people can find what it is they're looking for. The more signs you have in a library, the less obvious it is how you actually use the space. And for a comfortable space, there may be things that people really want to be able to find. And non-traditional programming things like maker spaces potentially, or cafe or gathering areas, these can all have multiple functions. This is partly to make sure that we stay flexible as trends change, but also in a small library, you want to do things multiple, you want to make them as flexible as possible. So a cafe, don't think of it as simply a commercial exercise, but think of a cafe as a place with booths, which is very similar to what teenagers might use to study in groups, for example, for collaborative learning projects or gathering. A young lady at one of the meetings Tim mentioned specifically said, the cafe is the teen space if we do a cafe. So we can think about things like that. Quiet study and flexible spaces and seating. We're going to look, here's an example. I mean, we have lots of seats. The quantity is the question, it's how they're used. Every one of these is at the end of an aisle of stacks. And so to sit there means somebody is potentially walking on either side of you, coming in or out of the stacks at any time, and even worse, coming across you, across the face of you. So in terms of a comfortable place to sit and spend time, we've got lots of seats, but we don't have what I would call comfortable seating. And that idea that you want to stay in that space, that third space. And then the presence of local history is something that would give more character to the building, and we've had sort of mixed, we'll look at the results there, but in our opinion, it should be a priority. It's something that separates your library from others and says, why isn't this a library in Florida or Michigan or California? What makes it Gilmore? So we know that regarding the lobby and meeting rooms, the lighting and display, we have this wonderful, iconic piece of catalog there. But it's literally sitting on a pallet to roll away. It doesn't look like a display. How are we interpreting it? How are we showing it? We joked around about putting meat hooks up in the lobby, but we won't. But having said that, there are ways to show off these things. The potential use of technology like self-help autonomous kiosks with maps and wayfinding. You can check on reserves. You can access the catalog. You can check on how rooms are reserved or make a request to reserve one of the meeting rooms. These are things that could happen in the lobby and speed people's efforts in the building. And not that we're trying to get them out quickly, but to make it as efficient as possible. Self-check is sort of the same strategy. It's not to get them out, but it's to allow our staff to focus on patron services. We've been looking at the capacity and flexibility of both Helderberg and Normanskill rooms, upgrading the seating. How y'all feeling? It's been 40 minutes, right? So you're in like 1.5 hour chairs there. But there are 3-hour chairs, for example, if you wanted to go that route. The public restrooms, including energy efficiency. At 25 years old, there are more efficient dryers, urinals, water capacity, and so forth. All of these are things we can talk about. And again, we keep coming back to the character and local history of the building. To think that this is one of the primary, most important pieces of the library, as identified by the patrons, the programs and the stories and the things that happen here, that's one of the biggest things for them. That is a very dark way of entering that, right? So we have this whole lobby with 4 or 6 recessed can lights in it. Yet that's where the display cases are. That's the entry to our big meeting rooms where all of our programs happen. That's an opportunity that we can pick up on. Identified priorities within the Access and Collection Services Department. Many of you have heard me talk about the idea of a desk that's less of a barrier, but we want to rethink how circulation works and how returns work. Again, the focus on patron service. You call them constituents in the town, the school calls them students, stores call them customers, we call them patrons. It's all about the service of those people, though. We want to separate some of the back of house. So when you look back behind this ACS area and you see all that's happening there, that could be interesting if it was a honey-making operation or something that was inherently something you wanted to educate about. But it's a distraction to the people who have to work there. And in fact, it's reflected in their ability to perform work back here, not be distracted by what's happening at the desk, get returns back into the collection correctly and back on the shelves. All those things are sacrificed when we don't create a space that allows the staff to do their very important work. And it exposes an area that's necessarily more cluttered. The self-check potential, either expanding it or removing it. Right now, it's a pilot program that's about 12, 15 years old probably at this point. It's one self-check station, so it's either do it or don't do it. We have this one thing there. And we're looking actually at the statistics related to how that's being used. The holds and reserves strategy is another one that ends up in no man land between PPS and ACS. It's near the CERC desk, it's also near the help desk. Who goes where when they need help on these things? The entire process of what comes into the library from interlibrary loan or returns and so forth, how all that queuing and sorting, there's a whole mechanical process talking about improving efficiency there. Senior clerk locations that allow them to have private conversations but without separating them from the spaces in which they're engaged and their staff. And then clerk and page efficiency. So within ACS, there are several things we're trying to improve. Within PPS, we know that the help desk has been an area of concern for quite a while. Its proximity of their office to the space they serve, as I pointed out in the floor plan, is quite remote in some locations. At the help desk, the idea of quick access materials that are easy to display and grab can make an important impact on their ability to provide information and help, which we label multiple times all over there. And actually, there's another information sign on another wall that's not near this desk, right? The information where it used to be.
Mhm.
The Gilder Lab Makerspace is one of those things that can be a tremendous influence on STEM and STEAM and getting different generations involved in a synergy. It's also a good type of space to think about as a flexible space that can become something else later. So, for example, you have sewing machines right now. You have various implements that people might use in different ways during the course of various programs, but it's also space that could become meeting space, study space, and other things. Often they're not specified, unless there's something like a 3D printer, which happens to be one of the sort of key cliches that are happening in maker spaces now, but there's lots of ideas about how we actually come into the library and leave with something we made, not just something we picked up. And it's part of that dynamic experience of the library that we're trying to get at. There are many specialized collections, and the display of them is important. You'll notice when you look back here, you have this barrier behind that desk, and every stack from there all the way to the back is the same height. So one of the interesting things you're going to see statistically is the concept or the perception from many in the public that the collection should be larger, when in fact statistically your collection is probably a little big for your population size if we compare it to norms throughout New York State. So there's a disconnect between what the public perception is and what's actually there. And what it means to me isn't that the collection should shrink or enlarge per se, but that we should do a better job of showing it off, of explaining what we have and how accessible it is. And even things like staff meeting pods, making staff work, whether it's ACS or PPS or administrative areas, work better when they have an opportunity to coordinate their activities. We know many of the comments related to children's activities and the appropriate shelving for children. As in many library spaces, as the collection's grown over time, it is simply expanded to fill all available space. And what used to be an open space that allowed for movement now becomes crowded. More study rooms, which also serve as meeting rooms, which also serve as SOHOs or small office, home office. We can encourage business people to use small conference rooms as well as using them as study rooms. Energy efficiency throughout the building. You're currently doing a mechanical improvement project, but there are other things we may look at related to the skylights and other improvements as part of the material upgrades. The marketing and making sure that the efforts, currently marketing is set up in the administrative area, but making sure that it's accessible to the programming areas and the public so that all of those are jointly supporting each other. The staff lounge has lots of outlets being used in it. It should be upgraded there as well as out in the public areas. And connection of the administrative areas to both the public and the staff. Currently it's in the back. There's nothing wrong with that, but there may be some benefits to having the administration perceived as a more accessible component of the library. Something to think about anyway. So going through some of the key things, intimate reading niches. Instead of chairs at the end of aisles, can we create soft areas where people want to be? A robust children's space. We know that the gallery, performance space, and meeting space is already a specialty you excel in. We talked a little bit about exercise reading bikes. There's no reason that we can't take advantage of the idea of people wanting to be more fit. You know, sitting is the new smoking kind of thing they're saying. And having a few reading bikes with views out into the wooded areas, for example, would be an interesting thing. It's something worth playing with. The Gilder Lab maker spaces that are tactile, those are good experiments. And whether we call it a senior room or an elder room, but spaces that have a flexible demographic. So, for example, you might do certain programming related to seniors in that space. It might have a hearing loop. We would probably do a hearing loop in each of the meeting spaces for the same reason, and potentially hearing assistance at the health and circulation desks as well. As populations age, that can be something that becomes more and more important. I had an excellent meeting with your young adult group who had a lot of great ideas. And do you know where the teen space is in the library? It's not a room, right? I don't know if I won't go into it. It's a space. It's at the edge of the adult collection near the children's, but it's sort of just a carving out space. So if it's a chicken or egg thing, oh, we don't have enough teens come here, or do they not come here because there's not actually a space that would engage them? So we know, there are lots of things to work with, lots of improvements. One of the things was that axis of entry. So right now, all the effort that went into the creation of this big spine, this architectural piece, which I used as one of the other slides, and yet you only see it if you look left on your way past it walking into the building. And when you do walk into the building, you actually come up against this, which is blocking your view of the outdoors, or you look left and you see this, which are tall stacks blocking your view of the end of the building. So to get to that spine we just talked about, you would come in, turn left, turn right, and that's where that spine is. And yet architecturally, that wants to be, does that sound corny for an architect to say? The building wants that to be the main axis. And so as we've been looking at things, and we just started talking to the committee about this just this week, some of the concept ideas, we want to emphasize the great things the building has already and make them the best. An example, in the children's area, how things start to crowd into the spaces, and the height of the children's collection, how technology fits into it. These are all important pieces. These are the seating areas. How can we improve them? This is that spine. Right? Even an architectural image of fixtures that hang into the space could accent this better than things that just light up into the monitor. So, Becca's going to help me here. What we've done is composed charts showing, and for the next couple slides, they're differentiated between staff input and public input. And as you would expect, the priorities might be a little different, right? They're facing things from a different way. And that's not that one is more important than the other. The public is obviously who we're serving, but the staff are the professionals. They know their business, and they know, in some ways, what the public wants too. So looking at some of the key issues from the public perspective, safety and accessibility, and a lot of this related to Mercy Care Lane and that access, as well as the front entry. The cafe was dramatically popular amongst public input. It's not just a staff idea that wouldn't it be great if we had a coffee shop here. And some of the other key things, including the interior reading niches, a robust and imaginative children's room, even the makerspace, these all got fairly high numbers when we talked about it. Now, going to the same questions asked of the staff, you can see the cafe is a little less. It's still a double-digit number. The interior reading niches are very similar in priority. The children's room, again, is a priority. The idea of third space, the space you want to be, not just come and borrow something and leave, but actually spend time here. And then patron service desks and maker spaces, these were also sort of key items in that. As you would expect, professionals have, in some ways, a broader consensus on certain things than the public, which is going to be more parochial about your specific interests. So going to the next set of questions about program and resources, the public, this was a huge surprise. This is why I say, when we analyze it objectively and say that your collection is bigger than standards would indicate for a community of your size, the fact that the public is saying expand the traditional collection, we're either not showing it well enough, we need to look at better ways to do that, or perhaps we do need to expand what's actually here if that's what people are looking for. So I think that bears more study, but that's the biggest number of the survey, right? Expanding traditional programs, these are things like story hours and so forth. These charts only show responses of 10% or more. Non-traditional programs added in here at 15%, even expanding technology access. So there's some big ones there. We come over and again, staff is spread out, building consensus around some more things, but you can see improved staff workspace. And I want to emphasize, that's not a selfish concern. That's not something where they're saying, I would like a more luxurious space to be. They're doing a very important job, and they need the actual room and layout for it to work. They're serving the public, and that's exhausting. Adding character to the building, the fifth restoration of the finishes, the natural light, and these are some things you might expect from people who spend all day in the building too, that this would affect that input a little more than others. So as we look at some of those big numbers and combine them, again, green was staff input, blue was public input, and here's where we sort of see the synergy collect of where those priorities are very similar. Reading niches, 11 and 10. Children's room, 17 and 10. Cafe, 10 and 22. And then it's not that these aren't important or these aren't important, but that's where we sort of join in what people are actually asking for. And so as we're looking at schemes of what to develop, it's not that we're going to ignore this or ignore that, but it means as we're talking about the things we want to improve, we should put an emphasis on the things that have a commonality. Becca, is there anything you want to add?
So, and when you're looking at these numbers, that's not to say, it's not to say that the public didn't think of these things as well. It's when you look at a poll of 2,070 people, the public, they obviously have certain needs that maybe a certain demographic would like. So when you looked at the other surveys, you can see that it is spread out, but we are looking at people having maybe one vote, and they say, oh, we want a cafe, or oh, we want to expand traditional because maybe they've only been here for time. So this is, I think, something that combining the two together, not to say that a higher, like, technology was at, 9%, these are all 10% or higher. These are the larger majority of the topic. So here we kind of get that idea of these are the main things that we want to tackle, and that's something that when we're looking at design, these are those things that we're prioritizing, but that's not to say those other things aren't important. But you can see that, like Paul said, safety and accessibility, that's just as important to staff. But when they're thinking of certain things they might deal with every day, these are, so I think it's a good idea to kind of have those other things that we might put to the side and not realize, but now having these numbers, you can really see just what we might be missing and what the staff might see, but the public does not at all. So having this, you can really see the percentages and the sizes of what's our priority, and this is where we're kind of working from this point on.
Those of you who were at the Y meetings may recall some people asked, how can we only get 4 dots and a 5th one if we answer the question? And it's because resources are limited. If everybody had an infinite number of dots, you could put it all over the place and do everything. But the dot exercise was the beginning of this, and then the surveys later that start to show us when people are forced to make a choice of the 4 or 5 things they want to prioritize, we can then quantify these numbers a little better. So overall, when you actually consolidate those numbers, again, we know this is thrown off simply by the size of this, by where it was here. I mean, that skews it quite a bit. But having said that, if that's one of the priorities, the cafe, safety and accessibility, we know that these still are all important pieces. And so as we emphasize where it is we're heading with the plans, which are being reviewed with the committee and developed as we go along, we know those are some of the areas we're going to concentrate. So that's an update of where we are. I don't know if the committee wants to add any other comments to it. Tim?
Just want a comment/question for Paul, Becca, or anyone, including our employees, to answer. And you can't really give the definitive answer to this, I recognize that. But the high number of people talking about expanding traditional collections, and I've read all 300 comments, which will give the board a chance to read soon as well. They're talking about books, they're talking about movies. I think it's possible that what they're really saying is we've got the right books, we just need more copies of the hot items.
And I read through those comments too,
Yeah.
and I feel it was more that they expanding it, and knowledge of where those things are, I think, is really what it's coming down. More specific, they want one specific book, and that might be something. They also talk about ebooks is where that will be tackled instead. It's not necessarily, oh, we want more, but those comments kind of.
They make references to being 55th on the waiting list for
Exactly.
something that there are 12 copies of in Upper Hudson, And so partly, too, it's a problem not simply of the Gilderland Public Library, but of the whole system.
Exactly.
And that's consistent with what we're saying. Your collection is actually a more than reasonable size, but it's people's perception of the collection. If I'm 55th on the waiting list, I don't care how big your collection is. The thing I want to read is 54 people away from me.
And that's exactly why we like to compare the staff versus the public, because it might just be something that they're not knowledgeable about. They just don't know that they have the resource here. They just might not know how to find out that information.
Yes.
Yeah, apparently they're not finding what they're looking for. I don't know if that's, if they're looking for more, foreign language, information or specific books, or if they don't think that the Google Library is up to date, ordering, things that, they hear about, read about.
I didn't get that
It
sense
was
about not being
similar
up to date.
to what you said. It's about that if there's a popular book that's coming out,
Yeah.
and they want
solved by architecture, but solved instead by policy questions about collection development and how we go about, libraries buying more first copies of something even though they know they're not going to need them indefinitely. As well as the display. We know that if you put books on top of a display face out, you're going to have to be replacing them all the time because people will take them. That same book may have sat on the shelf spine out for a year and nobody touched it. But the minute you start doing that, further, when you start coordinating the display, and I know the PBS staff is good at this too, relating it to other events, whether it's programs that are going on here or local history months. So, for example, one of my conversations with PBS was about adding color to the length of that spine of the building with banners that get changed out once a month that reflect Black History Month or, Women's History Month or various themes. The Erie Canal pedestal that was out there for a while. And then putting exposing collection related to those themes each time. We get sort of a dual bonus. We get more color in the very, very white spine of the building, and it ties to what we're trying to move on the shelves. So those things we can increase circulation simply by exposing them better. DVDs and media in particular also, showing things face out. People, particularly with movies, get attracted to sort of the movie poster rather than what's on the spine. The same is true for books and your attraction to the color or the font or whatever of the title.
Yeah, maybe we need more DVDs and Cantonese Mandarin for expanding community.
That may be, and collection development is a science in and of its own. One of the key things about this community is the diversity here. And in fact, we've heard that multiple times. The access to the universities and how this is built out from the city of Albany and so forth. That's an opportunity not just to provide services to distinct demographics, like English as a second language or job search things, but also to pick up programming from those groups. So the example I've used before is doing a story hour in a foreign language and doing a food program with samples from that culture, and then slideshows from, pictures from my homeland kind of thing. And now you're tying into learning about your neighbors and where they've come from. And then that may lead to expansion of the collections and so forth. So, are there any other questions about, again, it's just an update of where we are. The committee knows we've done a lot, but we've got a lot still to do, but we're roughly on target. The plan was essentially over the summer to gather information, examine it, and now start to manifest it into improvements that we can suggest and budget. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Okay, are there any other comments on this topic? Okay, then, Carol, we can go to the treasurer's report and check register for July and August.
So I'm just going to do a combined July, August. If anyone has any specific
Well, the UHSL, if there's nothing from any of those, the other committees, we can go.
As long as we understand there's nothing for the committees, because the committees didn't meet. Just want to make that clear, that's why there's no committee reports, because there were no meetings of committees over the summer, except for UHRS. Right.
The Upper Hudson Library System meeting, board meeting was yesterday, and there was a very long meeting of the Services Committee going over the requests for funding from the various libraries. There's something new this year. Their requests for funding were far in excess of the money available. There are $761,000 available, and there are over $3 million in requests from the various libraries. The service committee was supposed to, decide on that funding, but they're unable to do so, based on the huge number of requests. They will be meeting again, and in the meantime, they will be getting back to the various libraries, asking for more information concerning their requests for funding, including if these are projects that can be done in various stages or monies that are not needed right away. But the libraries will not get everything they want this time. So there will be libraries which will be disappointed. Fund the checks and the financial reports were examined, and I have that information here in case anybody wants to see those reports. Kim Burke reported that his assistant, Heidi Flug, is retiring, so there's a key vacancy that has to be filled in the UHLS structure. In August, they implemented a major version upgrade of both Sierra and Encore, for those of you who are interested in that. And there were two vacancies on the board that were filled with representatives from the Albany Public Library and East Greenbush. The Upper Hudson Library was also at the Scatcoke Fair. I don't know if Gilderland Library was part of that.
I don't think so.
I didn't know anything about it.
But there was talk about how the Albany libraries, the Albany County libraries, might want to participate in the future at the Altamont Fair. And that's pretty much it. The major thing is the money. So we'll have to see what happens with that. And I don't know if we're going to have to scale back anything, but that's the report from the Upper Hudson. Now, we have the committee assignments.
I make a motion to approve the committee assignments as presented.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Peter.
Okay, seeing no discussion, we go directly to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the committee assignments as presented, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. And now we can go to the directors, staff directors.
Okay. As always, you have the printed report, and so I won't repeat much of that. And in fact, the first note that I took for myself was about the Upper Hudson grant process, so I don't have to repeat that. So one thing I want to say is that Carol Cott and I had an initial meeting with Teal Becker and Charamonte on the Thursday that the audit wrapped up. And they talked about it being generally a very good audit. I don't think any surprises are coming our way when we hear in a more detailed sense from them. So I do want to ask, though, I got a call today from Vince Camizzo, who's the partner, I guess, on the audit. And Vince is making a request that we do things a little differently when we hear the audit report this year. So Chris Aldrich, please interrupt me if you think we should defer this to when we're talking about the Finance Committee. But what he wants to do is not appear on the October board meeting agenda, but have a Finance Committee meeting sometime between now and the end of September or very early October, to which any interested board members who were not Finance Committee members would obviously be invited to go to. They want to present the substantial audit report at that meeting, and then just have you guys vote in October without them even being present. And their thinking on it is that by giving either the Finance Committee or all interested and available board members the information earlier, that would give you some time to think about accepting the report. I told him that I liked the idea that, in my opinion, didn't really count, but that it dovetailed with the way we're trying to do business in the last month or so, which is to get as much information out to you via email in advance of the board meeting, so you have time to consider things. From a due diligence point of view, I said I have to ask you, I hope there's nothing in your audit report that you don't want to say in an open public meeting like the October board meeting. And he said, no, it's not that at all. We have a scheduling conflict, and more of our clients actually do it the way we're talking about than the way we have done it here in the past. So at some point, I will need to get, I promised to call him tomorrow and let him know whether you guys were amenable to that solution. Okay. While I'm at it, on a close to that area, there are, as I see it, 4 matters. And actually, I asked him, how long will this take at a Finance Committee meeting? Because there are several matters that over the summer, at the last board meeting, we've decided to put in the hands of the Finance Committee. So he said that the audit report would take no more than 1 hour. So the 4 matters I can think of that are before the audit committee are the audit itself, the Finance Committee, are the audit itself and the response to the management letter, closely related. Carol Valakovic has suggested that in October or November we should have our RFP out for auditing services for next year. So that's before the Finance Committee. We have the matter of what we're going to do about the Curtis and Fossick funds. And then lastly, we have tonight, we will take a vote later about whether we want to continue our investment relationship with Capcom and LPL Financial. But assuming that you say yes to that, then we have to figure out how much money we want to invest in the coming year from a cash flow perspective. So all those matters are before the Finance Committee as far as I can see it. So I'll go on from there. Two of our nice achievements in the last couple of months were that we finally got the 5 escape windows installed, and I don't know if I mentioned it in here, but I did mention that Captain Dan McNally came over to see how they work and see where they're located and so forth, and responding to some staff requests, we're going to do in 2 weeks some follow-up training with Captain McNally on the active shooter scenarios that we dealt with a little bit on Staff Development Day 2 years ago, but you can never be since our building has changed, we're going to do that last week in September. And on another type of security, we have been able to install a camera over the loading dock that covers the doorway area as well as the driveway area. So this would help us have a record if there was any intruder in the building. It would also have us have a record if there was theft going on through our back door. So that camera has been installed. The Summer Reading Club was a terrific success. You have the numbers in your packet. The programming staff really deserves kudos for carrying off just a much, much bigger event than we've done before that was much, much more popular. But it's important to emphasize that it's not just the PPS staff, because as the PPS staff is drawing hundreds of people a day to the building, all the other staff are affected. So it's really an effort of the entire library staff. In response to popular demand and also Barbara Federigo's request, we did add 10 more Wi-Fi hotspots to the collection. We can't just add as many as we want because they're sort of metered. Like they come from programs at the different phone companies that are meant to address things like people who don't have enough income at home in order to have high-speed internet, or people who live in a rural area. And so we can only get certain amounts, but Sean was able to get 10 more, which is, I believe, doubles. So we're up to 20. And on Sean, I want to give an example. It's mentioned in here, but I think if I mention it differently, we had a problem with our self-checkout machine a couple of months ago. And so Sean contacted 3M to get a part that we would need to make the machine work again. And before they would sell us the part, they said, well, you can't sell you that part unless you pay your $5,000 service contract for this year. And by the way, you didn't pay it last year, so you would owe us $10,000 before we could sell you that part. And I don't know if the part was $200 or what it might have been. But Sean asked the man if he was serious, and the man said that he was. So Sean thanked him for his time, and hung up and went on eBay and bought a self-check machine that was used for $300. Got it here for $180. Took the part out of it that he needed, and our self-check machine is working again. I think I want to just call Sean out for So, and then lastly, Ann Wumpel-Person encouraged me and made the connection between myself and Merrill Lee Lenegar, who heads up the Gilderland Garden Club. So she, Merrill Lee, and a couple other members of the club came and met with Lou and I, and we walked the whole grounds and got a whole bunch of recommendations on landscaping, some of which are happening as we speak. So individual flowers and so forth are, I'm not going to enumerate them, but if you happen to be kind of paying attention to the beds and the plantings on the way in, they're looking a lot better now. And I think we have a renewed emphasis on beautifying the front, not just the front, but especially the front of the library, because it's where first impressions happen. And so that is my director's report. Yeah, there's actually some stats in the report. I think it's about, I'm trying to remember the number I read earlier today, but I think, is it about 8,000 per month?
I want to say 5,000.
5,000? 4 to 5,000? Yeah. So it's in probably Phil's report, or Sean's. From Sean's, yeah. So they do use it. I have always been like, I don't want to use them at the grocery store or whatever, but I've started using them too, just because sometimes they're faster. Other people use them because of privacy concerns. They don't want to talk about what they're. And our staff is excellent at discretion, but still, one of my formative experiences here was I got a comment card in the first month or so that I worked here, and it's clearly written in a woman's handwriting, and it said, "I would really appreciate it if, when I check out a book with a title such as 'Can This Marriage Be Saved?' I don't get a question back from the staff member reiterating the title." I think the question was, "Do you want to renew this?" So our staff is generally very good at this. We apparently had one problem 3 or 4 years ago, but some people go to the self-check for reasons like that, you know, they're checking out a book on drug addiction or alcohol addiction, and they don't want to check it out with a human being. So, other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned that you're now on the board of directors of the Gilman Chamber of Commerce. And what is the effect of that on the library, or what opportunities does that give to the library?
Well, I don't know yet, because I've not yet officially been to a meeting, but I can tell you that Margaret served on the Chamber Board of Directors for the first 3 years that I worked here. I think that it basically gives you networking ability, you know, and the Chamber is always holding big surf events and so forth, so one of my goals will be to get them to do one of those in our garden out back, which I believe a lot of people don't know that we have. You know, the Chamber has a new director who I believe is showing signs of more life than perhaps other Chamber directors. I think that we can wait and see, but I think, you know, there's a perception, one perception I think we need to overcome is that nonprofits are one part of the world and for-profits are another part of the world, and they don't have anything in common. And I think that there's room to work with the business community, and I don't know how I'm going to do it yet.
But there may be possible projects that both
Sure.
sides can participate in.
Absolutely, and you know, since we haven't had a meeting, I honestly don't know what's on their agenda right now.
Well, bus trip.
Well, the bus trip is a current, you know, we do a bus trip to New York City. This year it's on December 9th, and ever since I've been here, and probably the 4 or 5 years before that, or maybe more, it's been a joint venture of the Chamber of Commerce and the library, and it raises funds, you know, as well as giving people from Gilderland an easy way to get to New York City.
Are you done? Can we just get back to the finance
Sure.
committee, the auditors, and any interested board members, which I think it's a terrific idea to start that process earlier rather than later and have people have the opportunity to ask me, have questions answered. We have an audit committee,
Right.
so this will take place with the audit committee.
He mentioned that he would like to invite them as well.
Well, yeah, it's not, I mean, let's just be clear, the audit committee, it's not that they should be there. And it's like, that's the purpose of the audit committee. So
Yep.
that the scheduling has to be in around their
There it
ability
is.
also.
Yep. So, and he was hoping that I could theoretically get some dates for that tonight, but 9:20 and 9:27. It's Alex, John, and Neil Banerjee.
But it's also who from this board.
Right, because you're supposed to have, I mean, don't we have to have like our audit committee specifically? I remember talking about this before, but it's supposed to be a subset of the, or its own
Of the
committee.
finance committee.
Yeah, and then they add, right? But I didn't see it on the committee, so.
Unfortunately, Brian can answer that question.
Yeah.
So,
Right,
oh,
that's right.
is that a fine time to do it?
We have old business or new business. So we have a lot of business and old business. The Capcom reauthorization, I think. All those in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, then we have the Capcom reauthorization.
Right. Take a minute to find the paper. So, this proposed resolution, which I believe you worked on with the last night,
Yes, everyone got a copy.
It's-
When everyone got a copy of it. No, I didn't revise it, and I still read it tonight.
we change the word one to two, would that answer?
Or any two of them jointly.
Yeah.
something like that.
So that
They have to be
means
joint.
to,
Yeah,
we
you
can
need
both
two
people
people
have-
I
signing.
know, you usually have 2 or 3 people, but they don't have to have joint signatures. I mean, like,
well,
You
but
authorize
if
somebody
we're
to
using the
sign.
same,
No, they need to be joint signatures, that's the whole point.
in order to.
You need two people authorizing one transfer instead of somebody on their own being able to do a transfer. Same way we have with checks. And you don't wanna reduce our check signatures to one signature, because that kind of circumvents a lot of the security of the system.
Terminology.
So
I mean, how much do you have? Can I make it to like someplace really nice on it, once I have signature authority? I'm just saying.
So Karen, where you are, you have several people authorized to move money, transfer, withdraw, whatever.
At different levels.
But any one of them can do it independent of everyone else? So any officer, for example, named,
Yeah.
and so what kind of controls do you have?
I mean, just because it's, we know the plan of action, I mean, we don't have to rewrite the script, but it's, I mean, we do different transactions, but this is just to have two people on application or something. It's just,
There's more signatures available.
Right, I have the same, and it's usually we do it on levels. You know, I mean, like, it's $25,000 more authority, and who has to decide, you know. But, it just, it's not to make it or break it, but it's kind of, you know, what do you decide? But,
With two signatures.
well, I mean, I'm not, that's not make it or break, I just asked the question.
Change any two of them jointly?
What does that mean, though? In other words, that's what I'm looking for. I don't know if any two jointly, does that mean? Any two of the four. Any two of the four.
It doesn't mean we have to sign in the presence.
No. So Tim, what that's gonna mean is that on the bank copy, on the bank copy itself, we're gonna annotate it and initial it. And if they have an issue with it, but that's gonna, and we're gonna certify that the annotated language is what the resolution is that we're passing tonight.
And we can attach the resolution.
To the paperwork, right?
We don't have to, they're not asking for the resolution to be attached, they're asking for the resolution to be certified.
I mean, just to explain, no.
It's gonna, it's the exact same language that's in the resolution. It's,
No, she's saying change it on the form.
we're changing the form itself
So it
to
says.
match
two
what
of them
it's, to
jointly.
match what it says. If they want to see a resolution, certainly they can.
I make a motion to resolve this.
Any further discussion? Okay, your motion, how are you gonna resolve this?
Oh, it's with the amendment,
Okay.
or any two of them jointly.
I mean,
Two of the four.
Do we have to have this notarized then, or
have what one looks this.
the resolution?
No. Just that.
So it's hereby, the last paragraph is going to read, or the sentence is going to read, it's hereby resolved that any two of the officers jointly,
I don't even think you have to see.
I don't think we need jointly, I think
You
just
just,
the
you
any
need to
two of the
require 2
officers
signatures of the officers.
of the library board of trustees.
Yeah.
Any two officers,
That the officers or any two of the four
no, that, it's two officers, it's two officers.
Yeah.
Two officers of the library.
I mean, if there's a vacancy, it's still, in an office, it's still required 2 signatures.
Any 2 officers, say.
Any 2 officers.
Okay.
I have it, and Judy may have it.
I got it electronically, but I didn't
Okay, so,
But
go ahead.
do you have a paper copy, does it say
I
the
do.
same thing? Or-
As the captain? I really don't know. There are,
I'll look at it while we're doing something, I'll tell myself.
Yeah, okay.
Is that okay?
that's fine.
And pass this down. That's a cap on.
Yeah.
That's an extra.
So this will need to be signed by Judy, Herb, eventually Brian, and Carol Valakovic, right?
That's the one that was on.
No.
That's
that's-
the signature.
So why don't I give it to you,
I didn't
and
want to
there's
sign it.
several
until we
places
actually
where
pass
you
the
can sign.
resolution. Yeah. But one of them a new copy? Is the one with the purple sticker, or is the original copy that was signed? Because there's copies.
As far as I know, all that's in there is what they sent.
So, okay, that's fine, then you answered my question.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, do you want to read the MBT bank resolution, or how are we going?
Carol's checking it out. I mean, Judy's checking it out.
What's that?
Get the MBT one?
Is it the same as the captain one?
No, no.
Well, let me know.
Okay, so that means we're going to put that off, okay, to the next meeting?
No, 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 only for 2 minutes.
Let me go to construction.
Am I, marking this up as well, because this also says the one of them?
We have to change, that's what we have to change in annotate the initial. But I think.
Don't scribble on it, what you're telling me, I won't scribble on it. Yeah, just literally,
Okay, we can go to the construction grant assurances. There is you have 2 sheets of paper, one a resolution, and the other the information concerning state aid for library construction program with the authentication of application.
It says assurances at the top. So I gave the assurances page to all of you by an email last night after the executive committee met. And I believe Judy then wrote this resolution, if I understand correctly, based on the assurances page. The 3 boxes being checked, the one being unchecked is the way it's been in every of our construction grants since I've been here. Brian plans to sign, assuming that you pass the resolution. Brian plans to sign either Sunday or Monday. The neighbor meetings and take care of it that way. Basically, the grant proposal has been submitted with a placeholder page for this assurances page where Brian's signature is required. And Tim Burke and Upper Hudson is holding the application until the page gets turned in. So, should we, I'm not by any means trying to influence you, but should we decide not to do this tonight, we are not filing a construction grant application by the October 4th deadline.
So you're recommending that we do it?
Yes.
What goes in the blanks?
UHHS, does the Upper Hudson Library go to the blind community?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the second grant, the construction project manager, we're having Lou Warner serve in that capacity, because it's really just a one-for-one replacement of heat pumps, building management system, et cetera. So our engineer agreed that hiring someone for approximately $50,000 to watch these things going out and see them is probably an effective use of money. So,
That's going to be you.
Lou, yeah,
What's this last one?
Warner.
I make a motion to approve this resolution with the Upper Hudson Library Services being filled in the first blank and the one being filled in the second blank.
Second.
Any discussion?
Looks good.
Okay, seeing none, we'll go directly to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay, land ownership is the next item on the agenda.
Okay. So, land ownership was also briefly discussed last night at the executive committee meeting. We have received, as everyone else in town has, their tax bills. The total tax bill for the two parcels up here is $3,800 and something, $3,850, something like that. It is due by about October 5th, something like that. I think it is October 5th. So we probably need to pay it by two significant. Brian will have to drop by and sign it because we don't have a board meeting before the bill is due. The executive committee asked me last night to call the town, so I called the assessor's office today, and I said we have, I guess I should take a step back. So Brian sent a letter to Christine Hayes, who's the president of the school board, asking for a meeting to see if joint ownership was in everybody's best interests. The initial response from the school board is that they're happy to talk about that. They need to convene a committee, I can't remember the name of it, business practices. Needs to have that added to their agenda. So then, that's where we stand vis-a-vis the school district. The town told me today that simply because we've started a dialogue with the school district doesn't mean we're not going to have to pay our taxes on time or face a penalty. I asked a follow-up question, which was, should we successfully merge with the district sometime during this year, if the taxes cover, are we eligible to get a refund? And their answer was the state of New York doesn't do refunds on property taxes. So
What if you don't own the property? How do you pay taxes on a property you don't own?
their position is that it's due now. It's due to whoever owned it on the date of the building.
Is that
So,
when a buyer pays the seller for taxes that have not yet been, the part of the year that the seller's no longer getting them, for example. But that won't help us if it's enough, if it's a tax exemption.
The question is when we should pay it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a way.
Seems like we should, it seems like we should get clarification on this makes sense.
I would respectfully request maybe we'd like to have our lawyer. Across the town.
I think that would be good.
I disagree, because we have an argument that we have plans for its use, and its use is as a non-exempt, as a tax exempt, it's a tax exempt, a potential tax exempt usage. So I would say that we need to not pay it, because we won't,
Then give us the money back.
we can't get the money back if it's then belongs to a tax exempt entity.
I have to, I'm not disagreeing, but I'm going to say that the original application for exemption from taxes that was sent in March had an opportunity for us to place.
Yes, the circumstances have changed, because we have more, our planning has progressed.
And the appeal, it said the form in March not only says, we have a plan, it says, when will the plan be implemented? So they need a plan that is,
But I think that if we're fiduciaries for the library, and part of our duty is to ensure that we're not paying more than we should, then we have to at least advance the argument. We may not win the argument, and in that case, we'll pay. But our circumstances have changed since that application was filed. We have more concrete plans, and we also have an idea that it may be transferred to some, conveyed to another entity. So I
In
don't
other
think we
words, if
should
we
pay
don't
it.
own it, we don't owe them the money.
But those plans haven't come to fruition yet.
That's
At
not-
the time of the,
That's
at
not
the
the
time of the
standard.
bill that we owned it.
That's not the standard.
If you have a house, you pay your taxes, and then if you sell it during the year after that,
I don't understand what the
Still
harm
have to
is
pay
in,
your
I
taxes.
don't understand what the harm is in not paying and going in front of proper entities and explaining what the changing circumstances are, especially since we're partnering with the town on certain other, projects.
there are penalties.
I mean,
There's a penalty.
we're using best faith, we're going forward with best faith.
Well, I make a motion to wait until the next board meeting to make a decision on whether to pay this.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
Before you, I have to ask a question before you vote on that. So I had made a suggestion that we ask our law firm to represent us on this. I have not successfully made any arguments in two meetings and one phone call with the town. So, and I don't think I have the ability, so I agree. But if we are going to not pay the bill prior to its due date, I think maybe we should have a lawyer recommend what we should do. And we have her.
I guess she's one of the two, otherwise we can have to pay her.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like paying anything we don't have to pay either, but if you spend 3 or 4 days on it, and you're getting close to the bill. So,
I'd be happy to call the town. You give me a copy of the bill.
okay.
We'll call them.
What's that do about now?
No, I'm not in front of it.
No, I
Second.
think we gotta vote on it.
And the motion is seconded, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, go directly to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Okay, let's take a hand vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed, raise your hand. 3.
Oh, who's the third?
Okay, the motion passes. So then is Chris going to take a look at it, or?
Sure.
Okay, fine. Okay, the GPL logo.
Has been delayed to the next meeting.
Okay. Next meeting. Okay, are we ready on the MBT bank resolution yet?
So the NBT bank resolution would say exactly the same thing that the Capcom resolution says, obviously with NBT inserted where Capcom is. And at the very last paragraph, we would say that is, and again, I'm using the language in the NBT resolution, but changing it. It's hereby resolved that any 2 agents below, who are the officers, by the way, subject to any written limitations, are authorized to exercise the powers granted as indicated in the resolution. And for purposes of our resolution, I would attach this to our resolution because that lists all the different powers. Okay, otherwise, I mean, I just really be rewriting this entire list. And that's
Chris Aldrich as the chair of the finance committee. So that was the group that assembled last night, with the exception of her, who had an upper Hudson Library system meeting.
Traditionally, there is a committee of officers.
Well, that's her.
And then-
One of our officers is not board member,
I know, but,
so they would be a part of the executive.
well, I'm just saying, traditionally, your committee are your board officers and not others from the board. And I don't know, if that's a board determination or, I don't know, for Robert's or whatever. But I was just surprised that it's an executive committee meeting and they don't think the officers were there.
The only officer that wasn't there was Carol Belakovic, her good lieutenant, right? So we had two officers. Okay. Ryan referred to it as the executive.
Well, a person who's not on the board would be part of the executive.
That's what you get.
So Carol would be a part of it.
Right.
He's an officer.
I've never been in a group where the executive committee was not all the officers.
Officers who are board members, you can't have an executive committee system that has non-board members. Members have to board members.
It was very strange, but I've never seen, I don't know, others have been part of organizations. I've never seen,
I think part of it may be the uniqueness of the school district public library being required to have a treasurer who's not. So, applying things a couple of years old.
That's why normally that would be involved. We don't have that. We don't have that. So we need three people.
Okay, there is a, well,
Yeah, that's under new business.
yes, there's a question of the July 2018 board.
Can I back up for one more old business item? Margaret Garrett reminded me that we think that a fifth item before the finance committee is sorting out the balance sheet and the land accounts, land and building accounts. Didn't the board decide earlier that David was going to work on that, but with guidance from the finance committee? So I just want to say that there's a fifth item, and I've written it down, paid good things to the finance committee. So we can move
Carol or Dave or something that already made.
significant progress. Yeah, that's
Identify
probably Dave and Carol.
which one is.
Okay, and you set tentative dates for the finance committee meeting.
Yes.
Yep. 9/20 and 9/27. Should I do a doodle of the finance and audit committee members?
But we gotta find out from the audit, those two people.
Yeah, I would just include it in the doodle.
Well, they have to be able to come.
Right, right. So I guess I'd start with them.
Yeah.
Could you be available for these days?
Well, wait,
Yeah.
the audit committee of the board of directors must be present, not non-board members who also sit ad hoc on the audit committee. Okay, so like, I don't have to be present, and your civilian audit committee members do not have to be present at the presentation of the audit. If you have board members who sit on an audit committee, those are the people who have to be presented.
Oh, the other two don't, you need to.
No, because they're not board members.
It was helpful.
It would, but they're not required to be there, so you don't just start with them and schedule it around them.
Was what you had in mind, joint meeting, we went in committee, finance committee? Okay, and at that time, Mr. Camiso or his, staff would be there also.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now what is the situation with the July 2018 board meeting?
Okay, we simply forgot to deal with this over the summer, but typically I go to a conference with my wife in Washington, D.C. on the second week of July. So I have asked for the last 2 years that we have a board meeting on the third Thursday of July, and I would like to ask that again It is titled GTA Lighting Resolution in your materials. It was written by Chris Shanton after I sent her the GTA grant disbursement agreement packet, which I also sent to you guys. And so this is the language that DASNY needs. We are, based on an email exchange with Chris Aldrich, going to change two things. So DASNY will actually be called DASNY in the resolution instead of DASY.
It should actually be spelled out, dormitory for,
Okay.
and then that can be in parentheses.
And the other thing was, I believe the word authorizes in the first line of that paragraph needs to be authorizes, and then earlier it was authorized.
No, it's the third line.
Okay.
It says authorized, it should be authorized.
Oh. So that's the resolution, and to give you the context a little bit more, DASNY decided after a couple of years of hearing from me that we were now eligible to apply for the funds. So if you approve this resolution, I can submit the packet, which is applying for the funds. And it's a necessary step to this.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the resolution as amended.
I'll second.
Okay, first we've got to go to the amendments. All those in favor of the amendments, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Passes. Now, the amended resolution, all those in favor of the amended resolution, please say aye. The changes.
Oh, can't, just
You
make
can
one.
buy it. You can buy it.
It's supposed to be, if there are amendments, the
But
amendments
this
have to
was
be,
never passed.
are supposed to be approved first.
This was never passed.
There was never a motion for it. I made a motion to approve it as amended.
It was never a resolution to begin with.
Right.
Yeah, well, we've passed the resolution was,
No,
motion was made by Chris.
Chris.
to,
So it had to accept this, but it has to, if there were amendments, so the amendments have to be.
but it was, I
But the
believe-
amendments have to be approved first.
but it was not a resolution to begin with. It was only a resolution with the amended language. It was never put for us to,
Just vote on the amended resolution.
yeah, but, well, it's,
Okay, all those in favor of the amended resolution, now please say aye.
well, and I take that, but it really doesn't make sense because we wouldn't have voted on passing the resolution without the amendments.
Well, according to.
But I never would have voted that way.
is there a motion to accept the minutes of the annual and regular board meetings of July 2017? Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the minutes of the annual and regular board meetings of July 2017, please say aye. Okay, all opposed say nay. Ayes have it. And then, is there anything for executive session?
What about it? Did we do both minutes?
Yes.
Did we just put both minutes together? Okay.
When you're ready to go into executive session, that's to discuss personnel matters.
Okay, we are, and then there are people who,
Okay. You're in executive session then?
Yeah,